Again.
Okay.
All right, it's live. I'm gonna have to straighten it.
Are we live now?
Yeah.
Hello, folks out there in Facebook land. This is tax debt relief attorney Tony Ramos, and I'm going to talk about IRS basic payment plans. And if this is of some interest to you, you can contact me by commenting on the post of this Facebook post, or you can go to my website, TonyRamosLaw.com. And remember, this information is for general advice. Don't consider it legal advice. So the IRS offers 4 basic plans: automatic, streamlined, regular, and partial pay. The automatic you can get by just going to irs.gov. You don't need a lawyer. This is pretty simple. If you owe $10,000 or less, and in the last 5 years you did not owe the IRS back taxes, and you've not had an installment agreement with the IRS before, you have 36 months to pay, and they don't file a tax lien, and it's pretty simple to do. So if you owe $10,000 or less, you have a guaranteed payment plan. Now, the IRS calls payment plans installment agreements, so I can use those terms interchangeably. Now, there's a small fee to set this up, and you don't have to provide any financial information. So that's the basic guaranteed installment agreement or payment plan. The next one is a streamlined installment agreement, and this is for taxpayers who owe $50,000 or less. Although the IRS right now has a pilot program, you can even owe up to $100,000 or less. Also, in the last 5 years, you did not owe taxes, and you have not had an installment agreement set up with them. Now, if you owe $50,000 or less, you have, again, this is streamlined, meaning you don't have to provide any financial information. If you've got money saved up, you've got money in a 401k or an IRA, or you have an extra house, it doesn't matter. IRS doesn't care about that. So long as you can fully pay your debt in 60 or 72 months, and you either have a payroll deduction or automatic draft, what's called a direct debit installment agreement, to take the money right out of your bank account. And the good news is they won't file a federal tax lien against you. Now, if you don't agree to a payroll deduction or a direct debit installment agreement, you will have a federal tax lien filed. Now, this other plan, also considered streamlined, you can owe up to $50,000 or less, and you have 7 years, 84 months to pay, as opposed to just 6 years to pay. And again, the problem is between $50,000 and $100,000, you will have a federal tax lien filed against you. Again, you don't have to disclose any financial information to the IRS to get this. Then, what the IRS would call a regular installment agreement. It's not streamlined, it's not guaranteed, and they require financial information. The IRS has forms, collection information statements. They want to know all about your assets, your liabilities, your income, and your expenses. And so if you, this is to determine your ability to pay. If you don't qualify for the streamlined, then you're going to have to go with a regular installment agreement. And this is a lot more work because you have to fill out their forms, disclose all your assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. Now, if you have assets that the IRS considers you could sell or finance, borrow against, they're going to want you to do that. Also, you're going to have proof, bank statements, receipts, contracts, and that sort of thing. It's a lot more work, but if there's anything good about dealing with the IRS, it's based on your ability to pay and not so much on how much you owe. Now, when it comes to determining how much you owe, the IRS has something called national and local standards. And now, those standards are a little bit difficult to live up to. In other words, it's not easy to live off the amounts that they say. So it may be a little bit difficult for you to live with what they say, but once you go through this process, you have to pay over a period of time before the 10-year collection period, what they call a collection statute expiration date. So normally the IRS has 10 years to collect. There are some exceptions. If you file bankruptcy, if you leave the country for 6 months or more, if you file for collection due process hearing, it can extend to 10 years. But as a general rule, you can get a regular installment agreement based on your ability to pay, so long as it fully pays off before the expiration of the 10 years. Before I forget, if this is of interest to you and you'd like to talk to me about it with a free consultation, either go to my website, TonyRamosLaw.com, or somewhere on this post, we'll give you a number, or just comment on this post rather, instead of we'll give you a number.
I'm putting a link on the post.
Okay, Ruben, my marketing guy, is going to put a link on the post for that. Now, if you can't qualify for the guaranteed or the streamlined or the regular requires full pay 100%. Oh, and by the way, with the regular, you will get a lien filed against you. Now, once you get it under $25,000, there's a way to get the lien removed. And then lastly, if you can't full pay, there's such a thing as a partial pay installment agreement. And the reason it's called partial pay is because you're not, before the 10-year statute of limitations runs out, the collection period for the IRS runs out, you're not going to pay it completely. That's why it's called partial pay. Also requires full financial disclosures, and so you end up paying less than enough to pay off all of your taxes. Now, before I forget, going back to the regular installment agreement, or no, the streamlined installment agreements, the $50,000 and the $100,000, that's based on the assessed taxes, penalties, and interest. Once the taxes have been assessed, the accruals are not the amount that the IRS looks at. So let's assume you had $49,000 with penalties and interest, and then the IRS assesses you that liability, and then over time you go way beyond $50,000. You would still qualify for the 6-year installment agreement, streamlined, and then likewise with the IRS with $100,000. If the assessed amount is $100,000 or less, you still qualify. Now, going back to the partial pay, so the IRS won't allow you just to pay a lesser amount forever. They'll look at your tax returns every year or two to see if you can afford to pay more, and if you can afford to pay more, they'll ask you to pay more. By the same token, if things get worse for you and you can't even pay that, you can go back and renegotiate down. So, like I said before, if this is of interest to you, comment on the post or go to my website. Now, a couple of more comments. We're talking about the IRS standards, what they allow for living expenses, what they call national standards, local standards in certain categories. There's something called the 1-year rule. When your actual expenses exceed the IRS standards for allowable living expenses, they'll give you up to 1 year to adjust. For example, let's say you have a car payment that is $600 a month and the IRS only allows $507. Well, they're going to make you, they're only going to give you credit for $507, but with a 1-year rule, they'll let you have credit for the $600, and then after a year, they're going to knock you down to $507. You don't necessarily have to sell the car, but that's all they're going to allow for you to spend on purchasing the car. Now, you could, in this kind of installment agreement, you would pay a lesser amount for a year, and then you would raise it to fit with the IRS allowed living expenses. Now, you have to demonstrate that you're going to fully pay your liability to the IRS completely to qualify for the 1-year rule. And then there's something called the 6-year rule. If you don't qualify for a streamlined installment agreement, you go to the regular, you need to provide financial information, and your living expenses can exceed the IRS allowed standards, so long as you full pay within 6 years and you remain compliant. In other words, in the future, you don't fall behind anymore in taxes, you file your returns on time. So that's a 6-year rule. Now, finally, a comment on default. So all of these installment agreements require that you don't fall behind anymore. So if you, for example, had an installment agreement made today, and next year, when you file 2019 taxes, you file a tax return on time, but you owe money, you've just defaulted on your installment agreement, they will send you a notice of intent to terminate, and they'll give you a little bit of time to catch up. But if you don't catch up, you're back to square one, and you have to renegotiate or be subject to IRS collection efforts like levying your bank account, garnishing your wages, and seizing property. So if any of this is of interest to you and you think that I can perhaps help you, I offer you a free consultation. Either comment on the post here or go to my website, TonyRamosLaw.com, and we'll talk to you soon. And good talking to you today.